When the mighty Roman Empire collapsed in the year 476, Europe entered a new age, an age often described as dark, mysterious, and violent. This was the early Middle Ages, a period of transformation, chaos, but also new beginnings. Let's explore the world of Europe between the 5th and 10th centuries, the age of barbarian kings, Christian faith, castles, and raiders. The fall of Rome left a power vacuum across Europe. Into this vacuum came new rulers, so-called barbarian tribes. But these were not just wild savages. They were ambitious peoples who carved kingdoms out of the ruins of the empire. The Franks settled in modern France and western Germany. Their greatest king, Clovis I, united the Frankish tribes and converted to Christianity, giving his dynasty legitimacy. The Ostrogoths, led by Theodoric the Great, they ruled Italy, trying to preserve Roman traditions while blending them with Gothic customs. The Visigoths took control of Spain, creating their own kingdom until the Muslim conquest in 711. The Anglo-Saxons, tribes from northern Europe, who crossed the sea to Britain, pushing out the native Celts and laying the foundations of England. These kingdoms were fragile, often torn apart by war, succession crises, and invasions, but they laid the groundwork for the medieval nations we know today. As Europe fell into chaos, one institution became stronger than ever: the Christian Church. While kings rose and fell, the Church remained. It gave people hope, unity, and something greater to believe in. The Pope in Rome became the spiritual leader of all Christians in the West. Missionaries carried the faith into pagan lands. St. Patrick brought Christianity to Ireland, using the shamrock to explain the Trinity. St. Augustine of Canterbury converted the Anglo-Saxons in England. In Central Europe, monks crossed forests and mountains to spread the faith among Germanic tribes. Monasteries became the cultural centers of Europe. In dark, candle-lit rooms, monks copied ancient texts, preserving Greek and Roman knowledge. Without them, much of classical wisdom would have been lost. Christianity also shaped art and architecture, churches, frescoes, stained glass, and illuminated manuscripts. For ordinary people, the church was the heart of the community. Baptisms, marriages, funerals, all tied to faith. For kings, the blessing of the Pope gave their rule legitimacy. Faith and power were now forever linked. With Rome gone, Europe became dangerous and unstable. Roads were unsafe, trade collapsed, and bandits and raiders roamed the countryside. People needed protection. Out of this fear and survival instinct, a new way of life began to emerge: feudalism. The structure of feudalism. At the top was the king, who owned all the land in theory. But in reality, his power was limited. Kings gave land to nobles, dukes, and counts. These men swore loyalty to the king and promised to provide soldiers in times of war. Beneath them were knights, armored warriors who trained since childhood. They were bound by oaths of loyalty to their lords. At the bottom were the peasants and serfs. They worked the land, gave food and taxes to their lord, and in return received protection. It was a society built on loyalty, land, and obligation. Everyone had their place, from the king in his hall to the peasant in his field. Daily life under feudalism. For peasants, life was hard and repetitive: farming, tending animals, paying rent in grain and labor. Most never traveled more than a few miles from their village. For knights, life meant training in combat, jousting, hunting, and serving their lord in battle. The dream was honor, wealth, and perhaps their own land one day. For nobles, life was a mixture of power and fear, ruling villages, holding courts, and feasting in their great halls, but always aware of rival lords and invasions. Castles. At first, castles were simple wooden forts on hills, motte and bailey. Later, they became massive stone strongholds with towers, moats, and drawbridges, symbols of power and security in a dangerous world. Feudalism wasn't just politics. It was a way of life, a system that would dominate Europe for centuries. Image prompts, a pyramid diagram of feudal society with vivid medieval characters, peasants plowing fields with oxen while a lord oversees from horseback, a knight training in sword combat in a courtyard, a great hall feast, nobles eating, music playing, torches lighting stone walls, a motte and bailey castle evolving into a massive stone fortress. Even this new order was not safe. Europe faced terrifying enemies, from the icy seas of the north and the burning deserts of the south. The Vikings. From Scandinavia, Viking raiders launched swift and brutal attacks. Their longships could travel across oceans and up rivers, striking deep inland. The first great shock came in 793, when Vikings attacked the monastery of Lindisfarne in England. The monks were slaughtered, their treasures looted, and Europe trembled. They raided the coasts of France, Germany, and even Italy. Yet they were not only raiders. In England, Vikings conquered large territories called the Danelaw. In France, they were granted land that became Normandy. In the east, Viking traders, known as the Rus, founded cities like Kiev and Novgorod, trading with Byzantium and the Islamic world. The word Viking struck terror wherever it was heard. To many peasants, they seemed like demons from the sea. The Arabs, Moors. From the south, the rapid expansion of Islam brought new power. In 711, Arab armies crossed from North Africa into Spain, defeating the Visigothic kingdom and creating Al-Andalus, one of the most advanced civilizations of the time. Cities like Córdoba and Granada became centers of science, medicine, philosophy, and architecture. Arab raiders attacked Sicily, southern Italy, and Mediterranean islands. Coastal towns lived in constant fear of being enslaved or destroyed. Europe seemed surrounded, Vikings from the north, Arabs from the south. These invasions forced kingdoms to adapt, to build stronger defenses, and to rely even more on castles, knights, and loyalty. Image prompts. Viking longships on stormy seas with dragon heads. A dramatic raid. Vikings burning a coastal monastery. Terrified monks fleeing. Map of Europe with red arrows for Viking invasions, green arrows for Arab expansion. A Viking settlement, wooden houses, warriors around a fire. The great mosque of Córdoba at its height, golden light, arches, scholars studying. Arab cavalry in flowing robes riding across dunes with curved swords. By the 10th century, Europe was no longer the world Rome had left behind. It was still fragile, but it was changing. The rise of new kingdoms. In France and Germany, the descendants of the Franks, the Carolingians, and later dynasties began to build stronger states. Charlemagne, crowned emperor in 800 by the Pope, briefly united much of Western Europe, reviving the idea of a Christian empire. Religion and unity. Christianity was now the defining force of Europe, guiding laws, art, and daily life. Monks and scholars laid the foundations for future universities. Towns and trade. Small markets began to grow. Merchants traded wool, salt, and wine. Slowly, urban life started to return. Castles and security. With Viking raids declining and Arab invasions weakening, Europe could finally breathe. Stronger stone castles and fortified towns gave people a sense of safety. The early Middle Ages were a time of survival and transformation. From the ruins of Rome came barbarian kings. From pagan tribes came Christian nations. From fear came feudalism. And from chaos, Europe was slowly preparing to rise again. Ahead lay the High Middle Ages, an age of knights, crusades, Gothic cathedrals, and powerful kingdoms. The Dark Ages were giving way to the dawn of a new Europe,